small business software is absolutely like a huge space that is totally underserved. And payroll specifically is just absolutely terrible right now. When you asked, so we did a lot of customer research. We spent a lot of time talking with small, we didn't call it customer research. We just talked with small businesses.
Yes.
The nice thing about selling to small businesses is that they're everywhere. You can talk with them. Like if you want to talk with a small business, just walk down the street and start talking, right? And I love doing that, by the way. Like I think like that's the thing I love most about just past 20 years of doing what I do is talking with customers. It's the best thing. Talk with customers, understand their problems, and build something to help them solve their problems, and then talk with them again and see what do they think about what you just built and how you can go and improve it and make it better. Like that loop is, I'm addicted to that. I love that.
Welcome back to season 13 of the Room podcast. Claudia, can you believe we've been doing this long?
No, it's been 5 years. So many episodes, so many incredible conversations telling the stories of some of the world's most iconic founders and funders. And whether our listeners are new for the first time today or have been with us from season 1, we're so grateful for the community we've built.
Completely. We've had the mission to open the door to the room where it happens for those entire 5 years and have been able to do so over 120 episodes with hard-earned lessons from some of the top technology and consumer founders of our time.
And we've been through a lot personally as well.
We have indeed.
I built, scaled, sold my startup Prive. You were our first investor, so you've been there through the entire journey. And you've also recently graduated from HBS. You're now building at Vercel. And through it all, we've brought the funder and founder perspective.
Yeah, it's really been an incredible journey, and I'm thrilled that I'm back full-time in San Francisco, and we're probably here to stay. That means that there's more for us in terms of growth, both inside and outside of the physical room. But what's important to have really out there is these stories, and we've been able to do so over incredible guests from the CEO and founders of Flexport, Perplexity, Partiful, Zapier, Zillow, Vanta. I could go on. These guests and their enterprises have generated over $100 billion enterprise value and really, frankly, moved the markets.
And growing, especially in 2025. With everything that's going on in AI. So I'm so excited to share season 13 stories that are maybe a little bit more AI focused than past seasons.
Absolutely. And you can find us IRL and URL, especially with our events such as our annual conference Inside Summit or upcoming SF Tech Week events and beyond.
And if you want to get information around those events, subscribe to the Room Podcast and subscribe to our newsletter at theroompodcast.com.
Perkins Coie supports the most innovative entrepreneurs and investors in fast-moving and high-growth sectors, addressing their myriad of legal needs. But the firm doesn't just provide end-to-end legal and business counseling to its startup clients. It also facilitates introductions to key advisors and sources of capital. Perkins Coie's interactive website, Startup Percolator, offers access to programs, resources, and rich dynamic content designed to assist entrepreneurs on their startup journey. To learn more, go to startuppercolator.com and Perkins Coie, COIE.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the banking platform businesses like the Room Podcast use to simplify their finances. It's time banking did more than hold your money. Now it can. With Mercury, you can pay bills in seconds, close the books faster, and even send invoices. Not only does Mercury do away with a patchwork of tools, it eliminates guesswork, giving you complete and accurate visibility into your business's finances, all from one account. Apply in minutes at mercury.com. Welcome back to the Room Podcast. I'm so excited for this week's episode where we're sitting down with Tomer London, co-founder and CPO of Gusto. Tomer grew up in Israel, where his father ran a small clothing shop, and as a teenager, he taught himself to code and built his first piece of software to help manage the store's inventory, an early sign of his lifelong mission to make work feel simpler and more human. After moving to the US as an international student, Tomer experienced firsthand the friction of payroll, benefits, and immigration, pain points that would later inspire Gusto's origin story. Since launching in 2011, Gusto has grown from a 3-person startup to a platform powering over 400,000 small and medium-sized businesses, all built around one radical belief, that taking care of your team should feel joyful, not just compliant. In our conversation, Tomer shares the insight behind Gusto and what sparked the early product and company, his immigrant experience shaping the company's empathy-driven product design, betting on small businesses when most startups chased enterprise, which became Gusto's greatest advantage, and how he's navigating the next frontier of people operations in the age of AI, where automation meets care. This episode is about building with heart, scaling with integrity, and reimagining what it means to be a founder in service of others. So let's open the door to the room with Tomer London, co founder and chief product officer of Gusto.
First of all, Tomer, thank you so much for joining us in the room today.
Yeah, super happy to be here. Thank you.
We're delighted to have you back in the heart of San Francisco, just down the street from the Gusto offices. We're excited to start at the very beginning of your personal story. So tell us, where did you grow up and how has that shaped your view of the world?
So I grew up in Israel, and my parents have a small business, a clothing store for over 40 years now. So I really grew up around that, environment, feeling the day-to-day ups and downs of small businesses. My grandfather had another business down the same street, another clothing store for a different audience.
Wow.
My aunt had another small business down the same street. So that was just a huge part of my upbringing. So that means that, when you speak over, like in the dinner table, you talk about how did the day go? Like you talk about cash flow issues, you talk about employees issues and things like that. And like it's not just the kind of the kind of substantial stories and the content, it's also like the emotion. And starting your own business and running your own business is an incredible amount of responsibility. Often small business owners are not like trying to do this to like similar like technology companies who are trying to build $1 billion brand or something like that. They're trying to just provide for their families. They're trying to take a passion, something they love, and they want to make a living out of it. And that's something that I just grew up around all of my childhood. So, I didn't obviously know that a couple of decades later I'll be starting a company focusing on small businesses, but life did bring me, gave me that opportunity. So, that's a huge inspiration for what we do at Gusto today.
You intimately understand the customer base that Gusto goes after based on your own family experience. But for you personally, did you always think that you were going to become a founder yourself?
I loved building things. So I didn't know what a founder means or tech, or I didn't know what product management means and all that stuff.
Yeah,
like,
who does a 10, right?
Yeah. So I grew up in Haifa. It's like, again, lots of small businesses, a port city. It's like a lot of kind of blue collar folks around us. And, my default in my career in life would be to take on my dad's clothing store and to keep working in that store. And, I had many hours. I worked went to the store almost every day after school, and I knew that's not what I wanted to do. So
Quickly.
on the other hand, what I did know is I got to learn about software and software development at an early age, like I want to say like 13 or something like that. And my dad had this issue where to basically keep track of inventory. There was no software been used. There's no spreadsheets or anything like that. It was just lists.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, and I was in charge of those lists for a while. And being in charge of the list, being a kid, I lost them sometimes. Or I remember like one day that, we just washed the floor and then the list just dropped on the floor and then like it's all water and like we need to kind of recount all the inventory and all that stuff. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I know that software can do it because I had a computer. I had a 386 at home. So I knew computers can remember things and track things. How can I build like something that we can use, an app that we can use? It wasn't called an app, but like something we can use to track the inventory. And I went to we had a bookstore. So next to my dad's shop, there is a falafel shop. It's in Israel.
Nice.
Very good falafel. But right next to that, there's a bookstore. And I went there and I asked the guy who worked there, who very, very luckily knew to recommend me Visual Basic 6, a book about Visual Basic 6. Back then, it was like the simplest way of building something. And it was actually quite simple for someone with no experience at all. Remember, English is my second language, so I had to like learn a lot of English along the way. Like, I learned English at school, but like you have another barrier if you're like a software engineer. If you're building software and you're not like American or something like that, language is another barrier. But anyway, I built this very simple piece of software. I showed it to my dad. He got so excited about it that he bought a PC to his store just to run it. And for me, as a kid, it was a huge deal because I knew computers are expensive. So I think I fell in love in software and in building that moment. And then I took that from there and, kept building stuff. I had like a bunch of other kind of mini project startups along the way. But that was kind of the moment. But I did know I want to build something. So it would have been like, okay, well, I have a fallback to work in the clothing store.
Yeah.
But like if I really get my way and work really hard and kind of work on these projects, maybe I get to build software one day. Absolutely. I didn't know what it means more than that.
Right. Like the idea of a founder is so abstract. And honestly, even
Right.
today, it's become so glamorized and popularized. But at the
Right.
time, you just knew you had this instinct to build and you wanted to build for problems that were real and right in front of you and your
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, exactly.
And kind of along the way, spoiler alert, like you found yourself in the United States post this experience. And I'm sure you ran into some headaches that expanded beyond just, helping your dad with running his shop, right? You had immigration, you had HR, benefits. So we're going to get into what does Gusto do, but like peek behind the curtain of some of these early pain points you had in your own career journey that might have birthed what became Gusto.
I came to the U.S. Inspired by a commencement speech that Steve Jobs had done in 2005 at Stanford. And he was, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. And I rewatched it probably 50 times at this point. It's incredibly inspiring. Talks about like kind of life's purpose. Like about like, hey, you can influence things around you. You don't have to kind of sit in this little box. And he's obviously the founder of Apple, extremely successful at that moment of time, iPad, iPhone, and all that stuff. That was that moment. And I was like, where's that Stanford place? Where's that place that he's speaking?
Like a cool spot.
Yeah, it seems like, if he went there to do his commencement speech, it must be something. I thought it was in England.
Seriously?
In the beginning, yeah, because it's Stanford.
Yeah, sounds like
Stanford. Sounds
British.
like, sounds British. So, but I quickly learned that it's not, and it's in Silicon Valley, and this place called Silicon Valley, so I was lucky enough to go to Stanford for a PhD program, and like with the dream of like, okay, one day maybe I'll take some of the technology that we developed there and maybe build a company out or build a product. But as an immigrant, coming in, it's really cool actually, like to have that immigrant experience. Because you have like you kind of A/B test reality a bit. Like you see there's an alternative for the current reality that people kind of take sometimes for granted because that's what they've seen their whole lives, right? So for example, I remember like as an intern coming into my first American job as an intern was a YC company actually called Bump.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that. That's like the So iPhone just came out.
Yeah.
And it was this beautiful device, and they just launched the App Store, and it was all about like, okay, let's see which cool apps people create, and this was like the poster child app for like something really cool you can do with the iPhone.
Okay.
And you basically take a photo on one phone, and you literally physically bump two phones together, and then you move the photos from one phone to the other phone.
Like we kind of do that today.
Yeah, we do.
We did it with NFC and things like that, right? But that was like the cool thing was like a bump motion.
Physical
So it's
bump,
kind of like like Cheers,
Let's
had
go.
that physical manifestation. So anyway, it got like Steve Jobs talked about it on his keynotes and things like that. So it was really a really kind of cool company. But anyway, that was my internship. And I remember on the first day in the internship coming in, and you need to fill the forms of like being an employee. And I could not believe what they asked me to do.
Gosh.
It's like the I-9 is like multiple pages, W-4 withholdings. Like I had no idea what any of these words even meant, and there wasn't ChatGPT to just go and ask. You go to Google, no one knows. You ask around, you ask your peers, right? Like, what do you put in that number here? They're like, I don't know, I just put 0. I don't know. I just don't know what to put there. That was insane. And I think that, again, being as an outsider, you don't accept things like that so easily as everyone else, because I worked in Israel and I never saw forms like this. And it was very, very, very simple. So anyway, that's like an example of the sort of stuff you get to see as an immigrant.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant myself. My co-founder was an immigrant. So many of our friends are founders that are struggling with immigration or, folks from other countries that want to join startups, but they don't think they can because they're not sure if they're able to get authorization, in addition to the hundreds of pages of forms.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It really is a barrier to entry. As we kind of dive into that problem space a bit, maybe tell us a little bit about an aha moment where maybe you had a conversation with someone or you kind of dug a bit deeper into the problem space where you realized, hey, there's something here that's solvable that my past experiences or what I've built in the past might be a good fit for solving.
Looking back, there's a lot of different kind of components and things that kind of got to the place where we figure out like, hey, small business software is absolutely like a huge space that is totally underserved. And payroll specifically is just absolutely terrible right now. And somebody needs to solve it, right? So, but it the thing that got us to get to this, and I say us because it's not just me, it's me, Josh, and Eddie when we started the company, that made us feel like this was absolutely correct is when you asked. So we did a lot of customer research. We spent a lot of time talking with we didn't call it customer research. We just talked with small businesses.
Yes.
The nice thing about selling to small businesses is that they're everywhere. You can talk with them. Like if you want to talk with a small business, just walk down the street and start talking, right? And I love doing that, by the way. Like I think like that's the thing I love most about just past 20 years of doing what I do is talking with customers. It's the best thing. Talk with customers, understand their problems, and build something to help them solve their problems, and then talk with them again and see what do they think about what you just built and how you can go and improve and make it better. Like that loop is, I'm addicted to that. I love that. But anyway, so an example. So we asked them what their problems. Like, tell me about your day. What's going on? What's working? What's not working? Very, very quickly, we saw there's two types of problem people face often. It's cash flow stuff and it's people stuff. And specifically in the people stuff, it kept coming back to the systems around, like the systems made things harder. And then specifically payroll is the sort of thing that when you ask people around, like one of the most popular payroll products and companies out there, like services out there, let's just call them ABC for a second, is I remember asking people about, what do you think about your current payroll system? And like a very like innocent like question, non-salesy, I had nothing to sell. And they said, we use ABC and my password to ABC is fuck ABC. And I was like, whoa.
That's intense. That's emotion.
This is emotion.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as a product person, that's what you crave, right?
Yeah.
You want to see the emotion. You want to either see people say this sucks or this is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
The things in the middle,
Yeah.
that's just people being nice to you, right? It's just not interesting. And it's very rare when you get that. It's very rare. So when you get that, like you just jump on it. So that's like one example of like, people were cursing. And it's not one person. 3 people told me this. 3 different, and I didn't even ask people for their passwords or anything like that. Just like by the way, that's something that perhaps ABC should look into their passwords. That if that is a common password, it could be a security issue.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when there's 3, there's normally 30,000 sometimes out
exactly.
there. So the founder journey often gets mythologized. It's, this idea that you have, you build a company, it grows, and you've become a household name. And Gusto certainly has become a household name. But tell us a little bit about maybe an early moment where things didn't quite go as planned or you were feeling, okay, maybe this isn't the path forward for us.
I'm very competitive. I'm a very competitive person. What that looks like sometimes is you kind of imagine. You just imagine that you just see yourself as. I guess that's like you can call it like imposter syndrome too. I think they're very connected because if you're very competitive, you kind of often see people around you like, oh my god, they're crushing it.
Yeah.
And we're totally behind.
Yeah.
And I've had multiple times in it where I felt that, and in retrospect, that was untrue. But it didn't matter because it really actually motivated me, really motivated us. But it was painful. So some examples: we were part of Y Combinator, winter 2012. Like, I love the YC program. It's a great program. Highly recommend it. But like during the program, we had like around 50 companies back then in the batch. And there's like it's called prototype day. That's kind of the kind of a demo that you do in the middle of the batch, kind of show where you're at. And I remember, and it's just internal, so only the companies kind of hear each other's pitches. And I remember sitting there and I was like, oh my god, these are freaking geniuses building amazing products. They know what they're doing, and we're just like, I just hope we're not literally the worst company in the batch. And I was like, I was thinking in my head, I was like, let's at least be the middle. Let's at least try
we'll
to
take middle.
Yeah, and it's not that YC companies are competitive. There's no ranking or anything like that. But you just like as a competitive person, you want to feel like you're at least as good as like at least I don't know most.
Really?
So I remember that was a really difficult moment, and I looked back in my emails recently, and I found also in a similar vein, 3 months after we launched Gusto. This was like now a year later after this event. We already had did our seed round. Like we had like a few employees and all that stuff. And I looked at our growth rate, and our growth rate went down from like whatever, the 50-40% week over week or month over month. I don't know. It was like an explosion. It was absolutely an explosion. Up into the right, like crazy. But then it ticked down, like from the 50 to 40, from the 40 to 30. And I freaked out.
Yeah.
And I had this email, and the subject line was like, we are dying, and if we don't do anything, this is not gonna go anywhere. And I sent it to like my co-founders. We talked about it. We were like, okay, crap, like here's the stuff we're gonna do around it. Like obviously in retrospect, it was just a blip. Like it actually did not mean anything at that point. But I think that kind of these examples are examples that I think like the mythologized like founder journey has a lot of pain in it.
Yes.
All the time. And the pain is coming from like feeling that you're behind, feeling like you can do more, like knowing that, you have a very high bar, the opportunity is really large. If you don't do it, someone else will. That then you take this with you all day. Like we've been working, in the first several years of the company, absolutely, there was no night that at least a weekday, at least I would say that I didn't work until like 1 a.m. or something like that. And it was not like, oh man, I got to work until 1 a.m. It's more like, gotta push to get the most stuff done today. Go, go, go,
Yeah.
and you're always feeling behind. So anyway, that's like, I think over time it's got a little better, but not significantly better.
Well, with that pain, there's this undercurrent of passion that's driving you
Absolutely,
forward. It's
yeah.
not that you're being forced to do something.
Exactly.
And that's such an important early sign as startups go through those early ups and downs. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into your customer segment and something that a lot of startups struggle with. It's kind of that market part of product market fit. Similarly to my startup, we started with small businesses and then ended up realizing in order for us to command the ACVs we needed to have a repeatable sales motion, we had to go up market and kind of tackle the enterprise. But Gusco has really crushed with the SMB segment. Tell us a little bit about that strategy and how you were able to really build a repeatable motion around that customer base.
We have over 400,000 small businesses using Gusto today. They're everywhere from like, a single employee to like hundreds of employees and 1,000 employees. And they use us today for payroll and benefits and HR and time tracking and a lot of other things to run their whole back office. But we didn't start this way. Right. So we started with, very, very tiny focused target audience. And the goal was like, hey, if you go there and if you prove it on that like little tiny segment, you build a product that people really, really love, the growth channel is going to come from customer love. It's not going to come from hiring a lot of salespeople who are, amazing sellers.
Totally.
And that was a bet. Did we exactly knew that was the bet we were making at the time? No. We just knew we built what we thought was right to build, which is like great product for that for a subset of customers. But what we learned over time is that kind of customer love is sufficient to kind of command the ACV, and I don't need very high like annual contract value in order to grow, because I don't need actually sales team to go and kind of grow. Like the growth came from like primarily an engine around customer love. So the first decision we had to make is like, are we focused on startups or focus on tech companies, or focus on like just small businesses at large? It was a tough call to make, because authentically we knew a lot about startups because we came from startups. We also knew we knew a lot about small businesses from our previous background, but like currently like we are a startup and we understand startup extremely well. And there was a debate, and then we decided, you know what, we're just gonna launch. We're going to keep it vague. We're going to keep it open. We're going to say SMBs.
Yeah.
In some places, we're going to talk specifically for startups. And then we'll just see the signups we're going to get, and we'll make a decision from there. It was a very difficult decision to make. I remember like going back and forth multiple times, with Josh and Eddie on this. And I thought what's going to happen is that we're actually going to get a bunch of tech companies. And for SMBs, they're going to have like a bunch of things that we don't even know. And maybe one day we're going to go and expand to SMBs. And I was wrong. What ended up happening when we launched, that was like, October 2012. TechCrunch article and a bunch of other articles and things like that. We got a lot of tech companies, but we also got people who are interested in technology who happen to own a small business. And they knew that, again, ABC sucks. And all the other companies, like they didn't like their current provider. So very quickly it became from like startups being like 90% of our customer base, like within like the first few months of the company, to be the minority. And, today it's like, I don't know, like, if you look at the population, like today, Gusto's customer base really mimics small business in the US. And, so there's more dentists in the US than technology startups, right? We're still doing very, very well with tech companies, but it's just like less tech companies in the US. So that was like one kind of big early decision around segmentation.
A lot of founders will build a product, think it's perfect for a segment, and then through kind of organic usage, word of mouth, they realize that actually this slightly different segment is really where there is that 10x sort of resonance.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for founders who are maybe building a PLG motion or kind of navigating what their beachhead market is in kind of determining when that viral loop is starting to work and they should continue pulling on that thread?
Yeah. So there's several good like kind of methodologies of trying to figure out like, do you have the customer love that can cause virality? And then there's also, is your market a market where that is enough? Because that's not true for all markets. So that's just one thing to consider. So for example, the easy answer is like NPS. Look at your NPS. If you have NPS like lower than 70, I would say, like you don't have the passionate customer love that you need in order for people to walk around the street and like
Right.
Be out there talking about your business. And it's not that 65 is bad NPS. It's actually world freaking class.
Yeah.
65 NPS, right? If like most companies, you have like a positive NPS is bigger than 0. Check. We're good, But I would say like you need to like for real to get that flame, like you got to go like over 70. So I'm looking into that when I talk with startups. There is like some fun surveys. There's a Sean Ellis survey around like product market fit that I like too, which is like you send a survey to your customers and you tell them, hey, how would you feel if we took away this product from you? 1 would be like whatever, and 5 would be like this is terrible. I will not know what to do with my life. And you want to have like around half of people say 4 or 5. Like this is extremely painful for me if you take this away.
Right.
So these are 2 examples of like the sort of customer love you need to see. And then the second thing is to think about like, do you have examples of when you think about your customer segment, is this a segment that talk with one another about the products that they use? Small businesses do. When small business owners meet, they often talk about how they run their business. That includes the tools that they use, right? And often small businesses are really friends, like that. Their friend groups are other small businesses. It's connected, right? Developers is another great kind of sort of community that they talk a lot with one another very, very quickly. Like, a new tool gets judged by is it a good tool or not. But, some places that's not the case. So if you're selling, I don't know, IT software for like, Fortune 500 companies, that may be like a long slog where you need to have sales team and stuff like that.
So there's kind of this product-led growth motion that is fueled by this being an inherently chatty segment where people love to talk about what they use. Right. And I'm a former customer. In my last firm, we used Gusto, and I love the feature of the emails. It just is a surprise and delight moment every Friday or every other Friday that you're getting paid. Right. I'm no longer using Gusto. It's not the payroll provider at my current company, and I'm sad. I miss my emails. How did you guys, from a product level, think about creating these emotional touch points with your end users?
Yeah. So the company actually started with the name ZenPayroll.
Okay.
We chose that name because we wanted on demo day in YC people to remember, the investors to remember what we do. So we wanted to have the word payroll there. But we also knew that we were going to need to change the name later on. We changed it to Gusto because it's the emotions that you feel when you do something that is you're passionate about, you're excited about, you work with Gusto, you do it with Gusto. So that's just a little bit about the word, kind of the name. But our tagline was modern, delightful payroll.
Nice.
And the word was delightful there was like, people were very like, what? How can payroll be delightful? That's insane. Like, are you like,
a misnomer.
You're delusional. But it's a part of our product and design philosophy, and that's why it was important that was right there.
Right.
So how do you make a product that's delightful that people really, really love? Is exactly those things. It's you capture those moments in the user experience and you try to connect emotionally with where the user is at in that moment. So for example, if you're now a small business owner and you're running a payroll, the first step is like, oh my God, it's anxiety. It's like, oh my God, do I have all the information? Is it correct? And it's all about reassurance, like saying like, talking with you and like, the product needs to speak with you eye level, saying, hey, here's all the stuff. Here's the work I did for you. Everything is here. Here's what you should double check. And if you did this, and that, you're good. And then you feel like, okay, cool. You do this work. Gusto gets me. They're not like telling me like, don't worry, it's all done when it's not done yet.
Yep.
And they're also not like stressing me out, figuring out what I need to do. They're telling me what I need to do and they're acknowledging my emotion. I can move on. And then at the end of the flow, you just finished running payroll. It's like, congrats.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah.
This was a big deal. It was on your list the whole freaking week. You did it. It works. People are going to get paid.
Yeah.
Great.
Good day in the office.
Exactly. And the same thing when you get paid. It's as an employee. It's the same thing. It's like, finally, I was waiting for this. People wait to see their paycheck coming in. They want to see it. They want to. That's a moment of celebration. They take a picture. They send it to their parent. So for us, it was like learning about that moment, connecting emotionally, seeing the opportunities to connect emotionally, and then go and build that.
Well, that scaled rapidly. We talked a little bit about your early growth rates, but from the venture standpoint, the VCs took notice too. You've been backed by incredible investors. You mentioned YC, General Catalyst, CapG, and many more, I assume. Millions and millions of dollars at a $10 billion valuation. So first of all, just congratulations on getting to that scale and size. We're curious because we know every journey starts with an initial yes. Who was the first person to say yes to investing in you and your co-founders?
It was YC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was YC. Eddie, my co-founder and CTO, he had a YC company like 3 years prior to that. So he really knew, like he really felt like, it was a good program for us. And Josh and I were like, well, we're kind of like second time entrepreneurs at this point. We had like other startups, and we felt like, we can build this on our own. We don't need
Right.
like support. But he's like, no. You got to do this. And here's why. And we were like, okay, fine, let's do it.
Great.
Feeling like, again, very, very fortunate that we did that, because it's just like an incredible community of founders who help one another. That's meaningful.
And community is so important. It can be a quite lonely journey building and scaling
Absolutely.
something. And you've been at this for many years now. So you've talked a lot about the initial product offering of Payroll and how that created this surprise and delight moment, and that you were able to scale that.
Right.
But you've also mentioned that Gusto is much more than Payroll
Right.
now.
Yeah.
It's benefits, it's HR support, employment, just everything. So how did you know when and where to expand the core product offering at scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that our first big like expansion was to benefits. That was like 2.5 years, call it, after launch.
Okay.
And I mentioned earlier that when we started the company, we really focused on a tiny, tiny, tiny audience, and it was like small businesses only in California who had less than 5 employees, who had no hourly employees, and had no benefits.
Oh, it's a very niche
A
market.
very niche little tiny market. And the goal was like, let's make them really, really lovely. Let's get that NPS of 85, 88,
Yeah.
right? And then keep building functionalities to help kind of expand, right? So we started with that audience. And then the first kind of big expansion for us was like to move from like single state, just California, to like 50 states. And that took, as you can imagine, one state at a time. In the world of payroll and taxes, every state is kind of its own country.
That's
So
crazy.
it's like a big, big, big thing. But kind of along the way, we're like, okay, when are we going to start kind of with our next product and really build a platform? Because we didn't want to just be a payroll company. We felt like this payroll would be a great place to start because it has all the data about employees. So now that you have all the data, well, you can add more services without like a huge, like a long onboarding flow or anything like that you need to go through.
Makes sense.
And also, small businesses don't want to have 1,000 different tools that they use. Like, it's much, much better to work with a single tool. Step number 1 is like, can we do really well in California? Check. We did that. That's great. We're going to keep expanding there, but we're feeling good. NPS is high. We know where to go. We know how to sell. And then the second question was like, can we expand from a single state to multiple states? We got to, I want to say, 8, 10 states. The first 2 states were like, holy shit, how do you do this work? This is really hard. We had to do rewrites multiple times, try a bunch of different architectures, but it worked eventually. And after we got to like state number 2, 3, 4, we're like, okay, 5, 6. Hey, I think we know how to do this. 7, 8. All right. I have a team.
Yeah.
It's like an excellent team that's going to keep going, taking us from 8 states to 50 states. But we're now starting to have like the energy, to ability to go kind of expand towards the next thing. And that's where we were working on benefits, and then quickly after that, HR and things like that. And the conclusion or the advice to founders, like when to go with your second product, is don't do the second product if the first product doesn't work yet.
Yeah.
So figure out the first product, make sure it feels like you know how it's going to keep growing. But then on the other hand, like, don't wait for like a competitor to come in or something like that to disrupt you. Like, be the one to move towards your vision. And I think that's kind of the other side of it. There's another thing which is around financing that's really important. Like, we had enough funding from our seed round, in order to kind of have a new parallel team working on this. So if you can't have the fund, like if you don't have the funding, obviously go get the funding first.
I feel like with AI and how easy it is to
Right.
build features, there's a lot of early stage founders that are saying, okay, we're going to build a compound startup, but from day one. And so it's really interesting to kind of hear that even with the ease of building features, that principle you're mentioning still holds true.
Well, think about it as a customer. Like, if you have a single, like if you have a problem and you want to solve it, and you go to that product to solve a problem, and it doesn't do a good job in that, like, why would you trust it to do anything else for you?
Completely.
Right?
Well, you scaled Gusto to 400,000 customers, which you mentioned, which is like an incredibly exciting milestone. And you've done so over the last decade, where we've had some curveballs. We had a global pandemic about 5 years ago. I forgot about that for a minute. And
Where's my mask?
Yeah, exactly. We had like a pseudo financial crisis with SVB. You're so at the core of these business decision moments. And in times of crisis, people are still making sure they're getting paid.
Right.
How did you navigate through some of these outside of your control macro blips in which your customers were coming to you for answers?
Yeah. In retrospect, these moments actually are kind of like a jolt of energy to the company. Obviously, in the moment, you're like, holy crap, what are we going to do here? And this is really difficult. We've never done anything like that. And no one has ever done anything like this before, right? But looking back, it's like these are kind of jolts of energy. So in COVID, one memorable story is, obviously, like, it was like, I think a Thursday, and we were like, this is real.
Kind of a big deal.
And I don't think we're coming back to work on Monday. I don't think anyone's coming back to work on Monday.
Yes.
So, and we were all in office. So, there's that transition. And the memorable moment for me was like, I was very worried, again, being very competitive, is that, oh crap, like, like, because we're not remote first, it's gonna be really hard to get people to know how to be productive at home, to kind of keep delivering for our customers. um and I was absolutely wrong, because what ended up happening is the pain of our customers was so obvious. Like, small businesses who have, like,
Storefronts.
storefronts, they had to shut down. That's like their source of income and all that stuff. The pain was so hard, so significant, that Gusties, people who work at Gusto, cared so deeply about this, that they just plunged into work, honestly, probably like much harder than they've ever worked in their lives, like
Wow.
at least at Gusto, for the first like 9 months at least of the kind of post-COVID pandemic, and created a bunch of really, really unique features, and to help people get their PPP loans. We were the first one we actually helped define the PPP report, working with banks, working with the government to get money faster to small businesses.
Yeah.
That connection with the customer is something that was not like management top down. You should do A, B, and C. Here's the plan. Here's the roadmap. It was more like Gusty's like, hey, we want to help our small businesses, and that was just amazing. That was incredible to
So
see.
cool.
That was incredible to see. So,
Yeah.
I feel like that was like this kind of thing that talks a lot about culture. Like, if you like, being opinionated about the type of people you hire in terms of their motivation really makes a difference in those
Completely.
moments.
Well, and then fast forward a little bit, I alluded to this, but then ultimately, like, your own ability to provide the service of Gusto to your
Right.
customers was
Yeah.
threatened through
Yeah.
the SVB crisis. I'm curious how you thought about, in that moment, communicating to your end user, how you just talked them through what was going on behind the scenes
Yeah.
and help them not feel afraid.
Payroll is interesting because it's a little bit like that, that iceberg of, like, you see the user experience, but then underwater, there's so much, like, all the taxes, the filings, the payments, the connection with the government, the banking rails, all that stuff. Luckily, like, we've invested heavily in all these kind of infrastructure. We're very strong in infrastructure. That's why we actually have an infrastructure business that's separate. We didn't talk about it, but we have Gusto Embedded that helps other companies build payroll products.
Cool.
We have Symmetry that helps other payroll companies calculate taxes. So we do a lot of infrastructure stuff. But, like, as a result of that, for example, we had multiple banks as a backup. So when SVB stopped processing ACH, files, we basically moved to the other bank, and, like, none of our customers were impacted, other than the folks who banked with SVB.
Right.
And then for these folks, like, there was a minority of customers, but for these folks, like, they couldn't make any bill payment, they couldn't make anything because they relied on SVB for that. And for that, like, we had a special program to work with them and provide them credit. Like, I remember talking with customers on the phone, like, that entire weekend, and trying to make sure, like, we help them to make payroll on time. Making payroll on time is one of the most important things for small businesses.
Yes.
So we partnered with them to make sure that they were able to do that. And I feel like in both of these instances, both COVID, and the way we showed up there, as well as, like, this SVB, for these SVB customers, like, you earn that NPS, again, that customer trust, that customer love, for, like, forever.
Yeah.
Like, I have people still, when I meet, like, small business owners who use Gusto, that still talk with me about COVID, like, every time I meet them.
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, there's this little thing called AI also
I
changing
heard
the
of that.
way
Yeah.
we work and live and play. What's so profound about Gusto is you guys have been spending years building these infrastructure pipes to meet the needs of SMBs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk about what AI will replace, what it won't replace. But at the end of the day, people are still going to need to get paid and many more things.
Yeah.
So how are you guys thinking about balancing kind of the exciting parts of AI that certainly are going to be able to help Gusto scale and grow faster, but also keeping this deeply human connection that's so clear to the core of your business?
Right. Yeah. I was never excited about any technology more than I'm excited about AI. And I think people in Gusto are like that across the board. And that's really cool. It's just cool. It's just fun. I haven't coded for 10 years because, I have a different job now at Gusto.
Fair.
But now I can code again. I can vibe code. I can use Cursor.
Let's go.
And it's just super fun. I just did my first pull request after 10 years.
Wow.
And now, like, PMs, product managers, are also expected at Gusto to code and contribute to the code base, as well as, like, prototype every single thing that they're working on, including our designers. So I think it's going to make it is making already Gusties more effective. It is bringing in a lot of, like, a jolt of energy and fun to, like, we're changing these jobs. These jobs are going to be, much more empowering. You don't need to wait for someone else to do something. You can just do it yourself often. And I think that's true across the board. It's not just engineers and product, and it's also sales and customer care and so forth, accounting and all of that. For Gusto, how we think from a product standpoint for the customer, AI is an opportunity to bring in, like, this great technology that everyone talks about in the news. It's not just like VCs and like tech people talk about it. Like everyone is talking about AI. Everyone's using AI, right? So as a small business owner, you're asking yourself, like, how can I use that too in order to help me run my business better? So we look at Gusto as the company to help small businesses with that. So we try to bring that into our, into what we do. So whether it's like how you run payroll, whether it's like how you get paid, whether it's, the interface that you use, like and then trying to bring that into our customer facing stuff. And then there's the other side, which is the back end. And Gusto has, like, as I mentioned, like this kind of like, iceberg. So there's a lot of back end that you can go and automate. We're doing a lot of that too. So it's going to be freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be freaking awesome.
I was just going to say, we were here 6 months ago in this very room with the Factory AI guys who just announced their big raise this week.
Yeah.
And I think we all had this conclusion that, like, it feels fun to build again. And all of us are builders in our own way, different shapes or forms. And it's this inflection point in careers and also in being builders. I have one more question for you, and then I'm going to give it back over to Claudia, which is just around the excitement in the market. So we've mentioned AI as being one of those tailwinds, but also the recent Figma IPO just showing us that the markets are opening back up, and there's some other exit opportunities that have been effectively closed for the last 2-3 years. How is that impacting you and the team's thoughts about where Gusto goes next?
Honestly, we don't think about that very much. Like, it's really, the focus is on helping our small businesses, helping grow. Like, this is like such a huge market. So, we're focused on how do we help more businesses start? How do we help companies survive longer? Like, half of small businesses, fold after 5 years. We want to reduce that number. So businesses survive for longer. We want to increase number of small businesses formed. I think with AI, by the way, like, you're going to have many more small businesses because it's easier to start a company. That's really our focus on the financing stuff. Gusto's been profitable for a long time now, so we don't need to go and do anything like that. At least not yet.
The dream for every company. As we look to the future, I'd love to dig into what you see as Gusto's North Star. Do you see Gusto being the all-in-one operating system for small businesses, or is the sort of vision evolving over time?
The answer is, like, the vision definitely evolves over time. And I think that's one of the coolest things. I didn't know that in the first, 5-6 years of the company. I kind of felt like, I was always like the head of product. And I kind of felt like, oh, you have the vision. It's this thing set of stone. You kind of put it on the wall and everyone's kind of working for it. And like, that's it. And then you're kind of stuck with it. And then, like, at some point I realized like, actually we can change our vision. And it's not a big deal because people, you just tell them, hey, so we evolve it. So, I think today, because of AI, we're much more ambitious than, we were like a few years ago. So, I think Gusto could be, the most important company in the world for small businesses. That's what we're trying to build. I'm not going to talk about like the kind of big product roadmap stuff we're going to be launching, but like we're very ambitious.
Well, we're excited to see those announcements come out soon. And as we kind of look at the future, I'd love to dig into what's next for you personally, Tomer.
What's next for me?
Yeah.
Gusto. It's like, I mentioned that earlier. Like, I absolutely love this feedback loop of like talking with customers, seeing a problem, thinking about ideas, like how to solve that problem, build something, show it to the customer, get their feedback, and go build again. And that just like fills me with energy. So, I didn't know that when we started the company, that's something that, like over a decade later, I'll still be like so engaged and excited and like energized. And, Josh and Eddie, my co-founders, are also the same. But we get to do this thing, that we really, really love. And that's really, really cool. And we get to do this thing for people who we really care about. And that's also really cool. We just had our showcase launch last week, and that's like this big event we have in San Francisco with hundreds of small businesses and accountants coming in and learning about Gusto's new feature. And we talked about like how does it feel to miss payroll and how difficult that is. And then we talked about all the solutions around, like new solutions around, for example, instant payroll. So you can pay on Friday to get people paid on Friday, which is something that's like in Venmo, you're like, oh yeah, of course I'm paying someone to get money. But in payroll, that's just that is a serious innovation. No one does this. Big deal. And then what happens if you don't have the cash flow because somebody, your customer is paying you late? They will pay you a few days later, but like for your employees, they need the money on Friday. That's kind of what they expect for their finances. Right. So we help people with, a payroll, what's called Payroll Bridge, to help, and kind of bridge that gap for their cash flow. So we're going really, really deep into that. And like I mentioned earlier, like there's kind of two big problems for small businesses. It's, people problems and it's cash flow problems. And, I'm really excited about what we're going to do across both of these things.
Well, we're so excited as well. And as we come up on time today, we'd love to ask you the hero question of the podcast. We ask this of all of our guests, and that is, who's a woman who has had a profound impact on your life and your career?
There's a lot of women, obviously. in my life that professionally who made a real big impact. But actually, the first person that comes to mind now when you said this is Annie Duke, who wrote this book around thinking in bets.
Yeah.
So she's like a famous poker player, and she really changed the way I think about honestly the world and like decision making. Highly recommend this book. It's basically a lot about, as entrepreneurs, we often think about like, you do kind of in a very kind of black or white way. Like you choose a path. There's a right decision. There's like, here's the 5 options. Choose either like option A, B, or C. Which one is better? Pros and cons. Boom, make a decision, move on. And like in retrospect, good decision or bad decision, that's it. Very simple. And she thinks about decisions differently, more like kind of like probabilities. So that means that, you can make a decision. It could be the wrong decision. Probabilistically, you actually, most chances it's going to be wrong. But it ended up being correct. Like it ended up like getting the results you wanted. Should you celebrate that? Or should you actually celebrate the fact, or should you say, actually, I got lucky. But really, I didn't make the right decision. And what I should work on is, in retrospect, when I analyze my decision making, I should work on making the right decisions probabilistically, as opposed to like what ended up making the right results. And that really changed my how I think about decision making and product and company building.
You mentioned a graduation talk with Steve Jobs at the beginning, and Roger Federer gave one at Dartmouth, which is my alma mater last year. I don't know if you've watched that speech.
Yeah, I did.
But he talks a lot about this. Like he says that he only won 54% of his points, but 84% of his matches. And so kind of knowing, to your point, the probabilities, when to lean in, when to learn, totally resonates.
We'll have to link the book when we post this episode.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much, Tomer, for spending time with us today. It's been awesome having you in the room and hearing your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us at The Room Podcast. If you want more from The Room every week, subscribe to our newsletter at theroompodcast.com/newsletter. We'll be back next week with a new episode, an inspirational guest, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. See you in the room. Perkins Coie supports the most innovative entrepreneurs and investors in fast-moving and high-growth sectors, addressing their myriad of legal needs. But the firm doesn't just provide end-to-end legal and business counseling to its startup clients. It also facilitates introductions to key advisors and sources of capital. Perkins Coie's interactive website, Startup Percolator, offers access to programs, resources, and rich dynamic content designed to assist entrepreneurs on their startup journey. To learn more, go to startuppercolator.com and PerkinsCoie.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the banking platform businesses like The Room Podcast use to simplify their finances. It's time banking did more than hold your money. Now it can. With Mercury, you can pay bills in seconds, close the books faster, and even send invoices. Not only does Mercury do away with a patchwork of tools, it eliminates guesswork, giving you complete and accurate visibility into your business's finances, all from one account. Apply in minutes at mercury.com.